Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here with you all. I would just like to say that, GLSEN has now been involved in this work for 27 years since our founding, and the AFT was one of the organization's very first allies and partners in the work. So it is always a pleasure to be with you all. Always a bedrock fact that the people who know schools best understood exactly what was going on and what needed to happen. So these days, as an executive director of an organization working on education and youth issues, a very large part of my job is about keeping people focused and committed and feeling good about what we can accomplish and the power that we have to fight for good, even when things may feel and be extremely daunting out there. So I want to frame our discussion today with a little bit of history about the place of LGBT issues within the conversation about safe and supportive schools. As I mentioned, GLSEN got its start 27 years ago, 1990, and we've been through a number of phases of history on these issues at this point. I myself have worked at GLSEN for about 17 years, which gives me the benefit right now of some long-term perspective on how much progress we've made. Going back to 1990, when GLSEN actually began its work, believe it or not, the first set of questions we had to answer were, what the heck are you talking about? There's no such thing as an LGBTQ youth before college. What happens is people go to college and then they choose to be gay. So really, there's no point to this project because there's no such thing. We don't have any gay people in our school, and gay was pretty much the shorthand then. So the first phase of GLSEN's work was about making visible a population that was pretty much not understood to be present in many parts of the country. The next question we then faced is, well, what difference does it really make? I mean, if there may be gay or LGBT youth in our schools, but how is that affecting their experience? So the next phase was about being LGBT in a K through 12 environment, or questioning your sexuality, or being the child of LGBT parents makes a difference in your experience, and in fact has an adverse impact on your experience. So let's talk about that. The next challenge was, okay, youth are there, they're suffering. The next battle was, well, what do we do about it? And believe it or not, one of the early answers to what do we do about it was convert them. And I'm not kidding. I mean, for those of you who've been around D.C., you may remember in Montgomery County, parents and friends of ex-gays took up the cause at the turn of the century saying, well, if you have a Gay-Straight Alliance or other student club in your school, obviously you have to bring in speakers to talk about ex-gay or conversion therapy as balance so that we can deliver these children from homosexuality. So that was the next phase of the battle, and our job then was to rally the education and medical community to say, actually, that's probably not the appropriate response, which resulted in a wonderful book called Just the Facts about sexual orientation and youth, which is still available from the APA and a great coalition for educators out there. After we got past that hurdle, we really entered, as we came into the 2000s, we entered a new phase. And the question then became, okay, look, this is a population in our schools. This is a population that's at risk, disadvantaged, and what should we do? What are the things that work? So at GLSEN, we set to work actually building and testing programs, looking at different school-based interventions, and beginning to partner with those school districts that were willing to make a difference, and with organizations, again, like the AFT, whose membership really understood the stakes and what needed to happen. So as we think about where we are right now, and for us working on LGBT issues and also thinking about our students that come from every population, every religion, every ethnicity, every documentation and immigration status, what we are all facing today, I think we must remember that we do so from a position where Everyone who cares about youth and wants schools to really work for everyone understands that there are groups of students that are facing particular pressures and challenges, and that responses to those specific pressures and challenges are absolutely appropriate and part of the work of schools. And that is not nothing. That is a historic change that this AFT and so many of these groups have brought about over a long period of time. Doesn't mean we don't have a big fight ahead, but it is hugely important to remember what we have to work with. I'm going to turn it over in just a moment, but I want to give you a sort of concrete representation. This is in your packet. Was going to be a slide, but now printed out, so I apologize to the trees for this. But just to say, in your packet, just a couple of slides I wanted to share with you. The first slide here shows you there are basically 4 interventions that over time GLSEN and other researchers have found consistently contribute to a better experience for LGBTQ youth K through 12. And this graph shows you since 2001, when we began tracking the presence of these interventions, we have seen a tremendous increase in access to these life-changing and life-saving interventions in schools across the country. 4 things are basically LGBT-affirming policies across the board at the school level, supportive and affirming educators, adults in the school building who know what to do when something happens and are prepared to do it and show support for their students. The presence of a gay-straight alliance or other student club where LGBT youth and their allies come together to try to improve the school environment, and LGBT inclusive, affirming, appropriate curricular content across the curriculum. So everything that GLSEN does is about driving those interventions at the school level, and we've seen a steady increase since 2007 in a way that really is quite heartening to see. And if you turn the page just to say, and here's part of the outcome. If you look at this graph, you can also see from 2007 on, we have seen a significant and steady decline in the victimization of youth on the basis of sexual orientation and gender expression over time. That's ultimately what we want. We're still working on the safety side of safe and affirming, but we're making progress. And then finally, just to say, at this specific historical moment, the last slide is just a reminder of the allies and partnerships we have to move forward together to try to hold the line on progress we've made and to try to assert now that every school has very specific work to do to defend and protect those youth who are most under attack right now across categories. Right after the election, we reached out to as we began to hear, along with the Southern Poverty Law Center, about the incredible increase of incidents taking place in schools across the country. We reached out to our partner organizations in the education world that represent the formal leadership. Just a note about this. You will see the AFT is not on this list of organizations. That's not because the AFT wouldn't have signed on in a second. But for me, in that moment, I wanted to put the onus on school leadership. So we reached out to school boards, superintendents, principals specifically, and obviously there's crossover in that membership, but we wanted to reach out to school leaders to say this is a moment when your leadership means you need to stand up for inclusive school values and specifically say all these students, Muslim students, undocumented students, LGBT youth, African American youth, youth of color generally, these students are welcome here, they have a right to be here, and our job is to serve them and keep them safe. And these organizations all signed on in 72 hours. After 27 years of work, that was quite a turnaround for GLSEN to be able to do that. And just was a really important reminder that no matter how tough things are right now, we're in a place where we have some institutional power with us to keep this moving forward. So with that, which is not to undercut how dire and serious things are now, but hopefully give us a sense of our feet under us to keep fighting forward. So with that.